All right, everyone, thanks for joining. I'm going to give it another minute and let people trickle in, but we will get started shortly. Just give it another minute. For those of you who've joined before, you guys probably already know this, but feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. There should be, I will try to get to as many questions as I can throughout the presentation, but at the end, we will try to leave some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there and I'll get to as many as I can. This will be recorded and we will share this with everyone who registered for it, as well as put it on the CABA YouTube channel as well for on-demand viewing, if you will. Okay. All right. I want to be cognizant of time because I know that a lot of people come onto these with questions prepared already. So we're going to jump right into it here. First, I want to introduce ourselves and thank you for coming to Today in THC Beverage, hosted by the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives. We do this once a month. It's generally the third Thursday of every month. February being a short month, I feel like I just did this. But we will jump right into it all over again. First, I want to introduce the coalition. We have a lot of new people that have registered and found us through a few other platforms. So our coalition is a beverage-only coalition in terms of low-dose THC derived from hemp in this case. But our goal has always been focused on determining and creating pathways forward for low-dose THC beverages to be sold through traditional adult beverage retail channels. So it's why a lot of our board members are retailers and beer and wine wholesalers in this space. And it's because we work so closely within the alcohol regulatory frameworks. Our focus is education and political action. There's a lot of groups out there in the hemp and cannabis world, and a lot of them have different missions and focuses. Ours is really to make headway at the federal level. So we focus a lot and were created because of the appropriations language that was introduced after the Miller Amendment that was put into the Farm Bill. And we focus on talking about dedicated legislation. We do a lot of education at the state level. So if you hear of myself, Diana Eberlein, who's chair of the coalition, attending any events at the state level, it's generally from an education standpoint. We do not hire lobbyists at the state level, but we do support our partners and other groups that do have representation in those markets with the educational material they need to move regulation and legislation forward. As I mentioned, Diana Eberlein, I'm chair of this group. I've been in the beverage space now the THC beverage space now for 8 years, focusing primarily on marketing, but also education. I am a low dose THC beverage consumer myself. It is the only way I consume THC because I, being a very sensitive THC consumer, wanted a way where I could really control my experience and make it sociable and blend into my everyday lifestyle, which for many of you on this call, you know that the target demo for the low dose THC beverage category is that 30 to 45-year-old female. And that's me. So I'm right in there. But what we advocate for, like I said, is for these products to be treated, regulated, and taxed very similarly to other adult beverages in the market. So a lot of our core principles that you see on this screen are what you've seen implemented in various states already for beverage and sometimes other form factors, but also for alcohol. I mean, we are very familiar with how alcohol is sold and served in the United States. So we are looking to really mirror some of those regulations to create safe access for adults to make adult decisions on their adult beverages. Today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. There's marketplace updates, current events, Regulatory stuff is kind of primarily why a lot of you are here. We are going to talk about why an alcohol regulatory framework, also known as the three-tier system, is gaining traction and very popular. We're also going to touch on upcoming events and fundraising and different things and ways that you can get involved in supporting our initiatives, but also the initiatives of the greater hemp industry as well. So in case you missed it, because I feel like we're going to start with kind of the market updates here. WSWA's Access Live, which is their big annual show, was a couple weeks ago in Las Vegas, and they did a lot of featuring of hemp-derived THC beverages. They had David Trone of Total Wine up there talking about the collaboration between retailers and wholesalers to drive across regulation and the support of the three-tier system. They also had a number of panels that featured their own wholesalers talking about why they got involved in the space and the different reasons why they felt comfortable working with beverages in particular. What's important to note here, and we are a beverage only focused group, so a lot of what I talk about here is beverage specific, but that's very similar to WSWA and other groups, not to speak for them, but when WSWA and the Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation and other groups talk about products, they are used to moving adult beverages. So they're used to product that is in liquid form, in cans and bottles, and various form factors and shapes. But beverage is what they know, and that is what they're comfortable with, which is why you tend to see a lot of alliances and allegiances created between beverage industry professionals. So seeing this collaboration and it really being talked about on such a public, large stage with thousands of attendees at the show is really, I think, what got people's attention. A lot of what Trone said got a lot of attention. I mean, first of all, he's probably one of the loudest voices in the alcohol space, and to be touting and really preaching the three-tier system, which for those on this call that are not necessarily from the alcohol space, the three-tier system refers to the suppliers, which are the brands, the wholesalers, which is the middle tier, and then the retailers. Within the alcohol framework, you have to distribute and sell those products through those tiers. And within the states, they also have state regulation on top of that. So alcohol industry, while it has that thin layer of federal clarity while it has that thin layer of clarity at the federal level with TTB oversight and all of that, as well as taxation, they also have states' rights, and states regulate alcohol. So alcohol is very used to being, to adapting itself to the different markets that it is being sold and distributed in. And that adds a number of different layers to complexity sometimes, but it also isn't something that is new to anyone who's operated in the cannabis or hemp space, especially over the last year and a half. But what we're seeing right now, given that we still do have an existential threat, is incredible growth. And this image here on the right, it starts from where Whitney Economics said that this category last year was ending at about 1.1 billion. And most recently, Trone has spoken to the fact that he believes that this will be a $30 billion industry one day, just right up there with craft beer. But we need regulation to see that moving forward. But in the meantime, while we do have some regulatory challenges ahead of us, which many of the people on this call, if not all, are very familiar with, and we'll dive into in a little bit later, we are still seeing incredible growth. What's amazing most to me is how many new brands are launching right now and new retailers entering this space. We've seen brands close notable raises. It's been publicly disclosed that Willie's Remedy closed a $15 million round. This is all while there is concern of all intoxicating hemp, as well as some of the therapeutic products, potentially going away November 12th of 2026, so of this year. But sales are still climbing. There's never been more awareness to our category, as well as intoxicating hemp products, probably. But there are still risks ahead. And things that we have to think about, and this is a big reason why a lot of people join these calls, is to talk about kind of the federal strategy and how we can push forward. But a lot of what we need to see in the next 4 months is regulatory related, whether it's at the state or federal level. Because if we don't start making headway where we create real regulatory pathways that are sustainable and enforceable, we are headed towards that existential threat. And come July, let's say, we might see slowing of expansion of brands. We might see retailers kind of pulling back from their expansions. We might see inventory management or wholesalers and retailers not taking on new brands, even if the sales are still there. That slowdown will happen towards the second half of the year. And that's why we're so adamant about pushing for federal clarity that gets us out of the existential threat. But like I said, we're still seeing a ton of growth. Sprouts is launching in more states. We're still seeing a lot of events incorporate these into their, beer and wine gardens. Target, has continued to expand, I believe, into more retail locations. And this just continues to normalize and deliver the message of like, we are here and we belong here and the consumer wants us. We all know that you cannot regulate away demand. And this is critical that everyone understands that. And we have to make sure that that's heard at the federal and state level. We're going to dive into the regulatory in a little bit, but I wanted to get some of the marketplace updates out of the way early on so we can take the time to focus on regulatory for the second half of this. Industry events. We talk about the industry events. We feature them quarterly. There's a number of events happening over the next couple months. We will start with the next month's events featuring other opportunities for brands to get involved, whether it's consumer facing events or if it's a B2B event, but there were a few that we wanted to highlight here and make sure people are aware of. So first and foremost, the Hemp Beverage Alliance is having their Women in Hemp Hill Climb next week. I am assisting with that and working with a couple of my favorite women in this space to deliver the message and really put a face to who our target consumer is, which, like I said, the 30 to 45-year-old female. Not to discount Mary Bernuth from Pharos, who definitely represents another category that's been growing in this space, which is the boomers. And it's definitely great to have us all in the room speaking the same message and really having them hear it from the people who are active in this space. Another event that I want to highlight is the CANABEV Summit. This is in Miami. Next week, as well as the Alt Bev Summit that is happening. They overlap days a little bit. Alt Bev has more of a focus on overall general lifestyle events or lifestyle beverages. CANABEV Summit is really focused primarily on regulatory and really bringing key stakeholders into the room to collaborate on how we can move forward with sensible regulation and move the industry forward collectively. Different events, different goals and reasons why brands might want to participate in, and that's great. I always say these events are not necessarily a one size fits all. Everyone has FOMO, and worries that there is an event that they should be at, that they're missing. But one thing that I do really want to focus on is the fact that right now, while budgets might be a little bit tighter because of the regulatory or lack of regulatory clarity, it's important that people think about what their immediate needs are and pick the events that make the most sense for them to participate in. And if that is selling product live to make sure that you have cash flow to keep your business going, that might be a different event than going to an event that focuses on regulatory clarity, particularly if they overlap. In March, there's a few other events that we're involved in. The Florida Alliance group, which is a liquor retailer focused entity, is having their event in Orlando on March 9th. And then there's a C-Store Cannabis Forum. It's the first time they're doing this, and it is March 23rd to 25th in Chicago. I will be presenting on some of the regulatory challenges that we see in our space. But there will be a number of other hemp beverage leaders that will also be actively presenting and some brands even on display and exhibiting. So it is definitely an event worth checking out. And if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, and I can share as much information as I can or introduce you to someone who is heading up either ticket sales or sponsorships. Now we're going to dive into the real nitty gritty here with regulatory. So first I want to level set because there were a lot of new registrants for this particular event. We won't spend too much time on this slide in particular, but I do want to make sure that we're starting from the same starting point. So the current landscape that we are worried about is the existential threat that I keep mentioning of November 12th, 2026. That is 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. Anything else higher than that qualifies under the Controlled Substances Act. That means it would be regulated and taxed like marijuana and have the same limitations that you see in dispensary channels that have legal marijuana markets. There are no carve outs for this. So Beverage didn't get special dosages or anything else. They There's no special carve out. In fact, this language is so problematic that it actually restricts a lot of the products that the president in his executive order about rescheduling that he needs to be legalized to go through his healthcare channel that he has been supporting and that he's interested in moving forward with come April. So it created an opportunity for change to that zero point 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. There's been a lot of conversation about what that milligram dosage is, but in the meantime, there's been education and key meetings with legislators at the federal level, but also in leadership with the White House about what this means to the marketplace and what opportunities and unexpected or maybe what would be considered maybe uninformed consequences of restricting this and not coming up with a way to regulate it. But there are opportunities for regulation. We've seen this at the state level and we're seeing it at the federal level. So again, we're going to start with kind of what's happened and then what we're hearing and what our opportunities might be. So first, you heard a lot about an extension. CABA got behind an extension as well as a number of other hemp and wine and spirits alcohol industry professionals. Baird from Indiana did introduce the Hemp Planting Predictability Act, which included a 2-year extension beyond that November 12th, 2026 deadline. So it would have taken us into 2028. And then Angie Craig out of Minnesota introduced a complementary bipartisan bill. And all of that was great for the representation of there being notice on the Hill that this needs to be regulated, not banned, and we need time to get regulation through. Farmers even came to the Hill and spoke about the fact that growing hemp is something that has created a lifeline for their businesses. And many people know that farmers are usually generational. You know, there was someone on the Hill that was a 7th generation farmer, and hemp was one of their pivots when something else kind of stopped growing in their area. So this was something that they really wanted to focus on. And if this language isn't changed, they'll no longer be able to sell their product come fall when it's time for harvest. And that's obviously problematic. So farmers definitely are a group that have been vocal about needing more time because they've already planted or are planning to plant. And March, April is really the last timeline that they're able to plant. And some groups are going to make some pretty tough decisions. However, I will tell you a number of farming groups as well as associations said that they can confirm that a number of their farmers did plant and are prepared to harvest and are hopeful that there will be some change that allows for a pathway forward. Shortly thereafter, these extension requests were put out there. Griffith's bill, which was the Hemp Enforcement, Modernization, and Protection, the Hemp Act, was introduced. And for beverage, that allowed for 5 milligrams per serving, 30 milligrams per container, which would allow for essentially like a 6-pack, which we see in a lot of markets with regulation. Obviously, what CABA has always advocated for on the low dose scale, there are things that we would probably like to improve upon within the bill. But the best part about it is that it shows there is interest in regulating this industry. Because again, we can't regulate away demand. We all know that blanket bans create very strong illicit markets. Some of our states with regulatory frameworks for marijuana know that if you overregulate or overtax, your illicit market thrives. California has seen that. And the reason we even got that veto in Texas was because they didn't want to deal with litigation, but they also did not want to push a $6 billion industry into an illicit market, particularly when they already have cartel activity and other initiatives that they need to be able to regulate and also be able to fund enforcement, which is why the taxation component to a lot of this is important. The Griffith bill is a very large bill. It takes a very big bite of the apple. It covers a lot of different products, and it might not be as granular as maybe some people would like to see it with specific categories. That said, there's an opportunity for us to continue to work and improve upon bills like Griffith's and continue to get traction. However, we are in the middle of an election year. And during election years, sometimes it is very difficult to get movement or traction outside of when there's a campaign or an opportunity, in a state that might be considered a battleground state. So we are looking at potentially seeing CRs and funding bills, the opportunity to make that change to the existing language might be pushed and delayed until September. But there might be opportunities for us to add what we call riders. So additional bills to be attached on. You probably heard the example of there's a Christmas tree and everyone puts their ornament on it. So there are talks about ag relief bills and different pieces of legislation that may be introduced that might provide an opportunity for us to add additional requests, whether that's an extension request or that is very specific language for a pathway forward for products is still kind of TBD. And I think ultimately what we're going to be seeing is the understanding that we need more time to get regulation through. But I can tell you it's very difficult to ask for an extension that doesn't eliminate the problems that legislators are concerned about on the Hill. And what I mean by that is their concerns, and we've all seen it, particularly a number of the people who've jumped on, I know, watched a lot of the hearings live during the funding bill package. The poster that McConnell and Harris and others have held up that shows all of the copycat products, the products that are Skittles with a Z that are very high potency THC, using new and novel synthetic cannabinoids like, HHC and things like that. It's very easy to collect votes and support behind you when you say you're trying to clean up the marketplace with those products, because we agree. No good actor wants to be trying to get these products in the hands of kids. That doesn't exist. So we want to clean it up, but a clean extension that doesn't sacrifice 21 plus or rather doesn't include a requirement of 21 plus to purchase or maybe providing a permitted list of cannabinoids that can be included and providing purity and potency testing standards. It's very difficult to get legislators behind those movements when they're still worried about these other products being available to be sold, at gas stations and hemp shops and bodegas, that again could be posing a threat to minors. It is very concerning to them, and that is the number one piece of pushback that we hear on the Hill. So I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory pendulum that we're currently seeing. There's a lot of state activity, and state activity can help us at the federal level. It's important that we understand that because sometimes we treat them like they're isolated. I hear a lot about Minnesota and how normalized it is there and how we just need to explain what's working there to DC. We're not wrong. We definitely are sharing that information. That education absolutely needs to happen. But we also need to understand that DC is not Minnesota. Toto's not in Minnesota anymore. He's now in DC. And DC has a very different appetite and palate, if you will, for THC as a whole, no matter what the form factor. So we're oftentimes having to start at a more granular level when it comes to the education component. We're also having to walk them through what's happening at the state level because they're not all aware of what's happening in states like Minnesota or the progress that we're starting to see in South Carolina. There's a number of bills that have hemp regulations. We need to bring that to their attention. And I highlighted a few here that I wanted to make sure that people on this call were aware of. So Illinois is currently, as of this morning or as of yesterday, got the update that the veto on the Chicago ordinance did stick. So we go back to status quo. There was a lot of concern around banning all of the other form factors outside of beverage would create a very strong illicit market, and we should be trying to regulate versus ban. Ohio currently has a ban that we are fighting, and there's a lot of groups looking to gain signatures. If you are interested in getting involved in any of the Ohio lobbying efforts, I can connect you with a group that is currently raising funds that a number of our members have supported. The idea is to try and keep hemp open until the next ballot and have that voted on in November. So it takes us, it eliminates the ban for now if we can overcome the initial hurdle and get the signatures that we need. New York just introduced a bill that would be putting adult use beverages into liquor stores and into more traditional retail channels. So I would put that kind of in the yellow because it's a meeting in the middle between marijuana and hemp, but also has some limitations on manufacturing and distribution and different components that would need to be evaluated based on that structure. Texas is currently figuring out their regulations. People do have some concerns over the license fees, but it is moving forward and they are continuously working to improve those. And everyone from hemp and liquor and retail is working on that kind of cohesively. Even the convenience groups have gotten more involved as well. And then the one that I've highlighted in green here that I want to bring everyone's attention to is the positive traction that we are really starting to see in South Carolina. South Carolina has become a top 3 market for low-dose hemp THC beverages and has very much normalized consumption of these products, particularly in Charleston, where if you're on Main Street down there, King Street rather, you will see High Rise and a number of other beverages that are available in South Carolina, available in bars and restaurants all along that strip. Sachet is a retail location that's on King Street and very much in a prime, high traffic area. And it's because of the normalization of it. And we are really making major headway there. Big shout out to Justin Ashby of Southern Crown Partners, who's really been leading that charge and working very diligently and closely with policymakers there to create legislation that would create an opportunity for low dose THC beverages to move forward and have a very clear pathway forward. Because that growth slide I showed you of us getting the 30 billion, that is completely dependent on us getting regulation through. If we don't get regulation through, we are going to stall out. And of course, the existential threat will cause a major hiccup in production and brand development and growth. So we need regulation to create the pathway forward. The reason alcohol is where it is today is because of that regulatory structure that they put in place. So the state activity matters. And what I want to make sure everyone's very clear on as well is we can use the case studies in various states at the federal level to show that this can be successfully regulated. Tennessee, Alabama, even Kentucky, they have very robust structures that are being used as case studies at the federal level, where it has ABC oversight, there's taxation, there's defined channels to market. They're leveraging the 3-tier system or the alcohol regulatory framework, as some prefer to call it. All of those things being demonstrated and showing that effectiveness of it is critical. But the other thing we have to think about is if anything negative happens in any state. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, when there is a veto or a bill is killed, that can often be spun as the hemp industry doesn't want regulation. Our industry not only wants regulation, but it needs it to survive. So our industry needs to be very, very loud about wanting regulation and then has to commit to pushing regulation through. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. But when there are vetoes or people, file lawsuits against legislation, it can often be spun as a negative against our industry, even if it's not intentioned to be that way. It can be spun that way. So a lot of us have really focused on getting something through because something is better than nothing. And right now, I think the biggest enemy we probably have is perfection and getting everything we want, because that's just not what's palatable right now from a legislative standpoint. We need a foot in the door so that we can continue to build from that. One of the main things I want to focus on this particular slide is why we see carve-outs. There's been a lot of conversations around carve-outs. We obviously just saw a beverage carve-out ordinance in Chicago get vetoed because they wanted to regulate more of the categories. And it is great that the stance behind that is that we want to regulate versus banning. But there are a lot of markets that also, we have to acknowledge, want to ban everything. Many times the beverage groups are blamed for asking for a carve-out. But I can tell you from being in the room at the state and federal levels that oftentimes the reason that we end up seeing carve-outs or alignments between specific groups is because some groups are walking in with solutions and some groups aren't. We have had a code of conduct that we built and have stuck by for the last 2 years. The only modifications we've made to it are based on policymakers' feedback. And it's because we're listening. We are in DC and when you're at a state house, you are working in their sandbox. We have to compromise. We have to make sacrifices. So oftentimes we walk into the room with a solution, which for us, for beverage, where we want our products to be sold and served, that is working alongside our alcohol allies. And that is a very important component to this. But when you see a lot of the feedback we get, because our target consumer, for example, 75%, I've seen some anecdotal evidence, so there aren't a ton of studies about this. 75% of gummy consumers correction, 75% of the low-dose beverage consumers, once they get familiar with beverage, they get very comfortable with other form factors, like gummies. Gummies offer some of the other things that beverage has made very normalized for THC consumption. They are very discreet, they taste good, they can be very controlled, and the technology behind edibles in general has improved over time. So as a result, we are seeing more form factors enter the market and do and perform very well. But if we are not walking in with, here's how we need to regulate these products, and here's the solution, and we are just saying what we don't want to see, we are making it very difficult for regulators and policymakers to put forward language and put forward bills that we are going to be able to support and get behind. We walk in with offering frameworks that already exist that we can leverage, and we walk in with partners that are willing to support us, that are talking about the jobs and the industry itself that it is supporting. And that is really critical. But our dedication to legislation is the number one thing that legislators want to see. And when they see lawsuits or litigation at the state level, when they see, attempts to kill bills, regardless of what the bill may be, sometimes it's received as hemp just doesn't want regulation. And we need to make sure it is very clear that we do want regulation. We do not want bans. No one wants bans. Status quo is a better option than a ban, sure, but it leaves us very exposed from a quality and safety and consumer public safety standpoint. And that is critical. So that is why it's so important that we get behind regulation at the state level and we compromise. We get our foot in the door and we make progress over time. CABA priorities and aligned partners. So I mentioned partners and how critical it is that we have these groups. We are doing a lot of work at the federal level right now because candidly, as much as the state level activity helps us at the federal level, if we don't solve the existential threat at the federal level, a lot of the state activity doesn't matter. Some states might be able to come up with formats where adult rec products are being sold in liquor stores and other liquor stores and other traditional retail channels, but it becomes logistically very difficult to operate and it becomes very difficult for brands to scale. That is the opportunity that hemp has provided us. As a result, we are prioritizing a handful of different things. One is polling. We need to take a look at where we can assist legislators and other groups get more involved and understand that this is a category that their consumer and their voter wants to see. We need to get involved from a congressional giving standpoint. What alcohol and farming groups and natural products associations and ingredients have done for decades is work alongside policymakers at the federal level. They help fund campaigns, they help educate, and they work very closely with their different organizations to make progress over time. That is what we need to do as an industry. We need to set that foundation. Hiring lobbyists isn't enough. And we do have a lot of lobbyists. And I will say thank you to everyone who's on this call who's hired additional federal lobbyists. I would say the top, probably 80% of the top firms in DC are probably touching hemp in some way right now. And it is very important that we keep that pressure up, but we also need to get involved and work very closely with the legislators themselves and show them our dedication to regulation and pushing these bills through. We are collaborating very much with liquor suppliers as well as other alcohol players. The main goals that they have are evening the playing field and trade practices. There are certain things that with working within an alcohol regulatory framework that we are not currently being held to. And as a result, it's creating this uneven playing field. The ones that maybe don't make the headlines all the time are the fact that we can pay for slotting. When I say we, I should say hemp beverage. Hemp beverage right now can pay for slotting fees. We can pay for end caps. We can market differently. We have access to different channels. In some of the marketing that we've seen in the past, we have put down alcohol and other adult beverages in an effort to promote ours. Those are things that would not be permitted if we're working within an alcohol regulatory framework. And it's important that we realize that to get something over the line, we need these partners. They bring legitimacy to our industry. They also are where we want our products sold and served. So if you want to work and have your product sold at Total Wine or Specs, ABC, Circle K, you need to be working with those organizations to move the needle forward. And we've been very loud about where we sit in terms of support of an alcohol regulatory framework. We've also been very vocal about our definitions for low dose THC beverage and self-regulatory best practices, and so have these other groups. So all of us are working together to pool money and fundraise so that we can be more effective on the Hill. We'll talk about how you can get involved, particularly if you're interested in CABA in a minute, but I do want to make sure that I highlight that there are associations for everybody. And I think the worst thing anyone can do is sit by and not get involved. CABA is really been focused on uniting the voices between alcohol and hemp. Hemp beverages make up a majority and supply chain partners make up a majority of our membership, but we do have retailers and ancillary services in different groups that we work with. WSWA is obviously the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. BAMCO, I highlighted here, is the Beverage Alcohol Merchants Coalition. They are primarily, liquor retailers that are actively lobbying at the federal level and are getting very involved in these conversations. And then we have the Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation, which was headed up by Justin Ashby of Southern Crown Partners. And they are really looking to represent total beverage, right? And get behind this particular initiative, while some other groups might be bifurcated and not able to lobby in support of any particular step in one direction or another. If you're a retailer, BAMCO might make more sense for you to join their group and support their lobbying efforts. If you're a wholesaler, WSWA or BWRR might be a better program for you. If you're a hemp beverage, I might be a good group for you to speak with or join. If you are another category, there are other associations you can join. And I think it's important that everyone gets involved and does their homework and calls those associations and speaks to them and talks to them about what their foundation is and what their platform is, and make sure that there is alignment between you and those groups. Because the worst thing that we can do is kind of sit on our hands and not get involved. That's the only way to guarantee that we do not make progress as an industry. And right now we are in this is beyond the 11th hour that we need to be getting involved here and really being careful about our congressional spending. A couple of things I do want to point out for a lot of people. There are many tactics and many strategies to win. No one knows which one is going to win. There's no guarantees. That's not how this works, unfortunately. Just like there's many ways to win a Super Bowl, you don't know which one's going to win until the game's over. So here we are really fighting and putting together strategies, and our strategies are not single-threaded. We have multiple strategies because anyone who's been in the cannabis industry knows you have to pivot on a regular basis. And we have done more pivoting in the last year and a half than we've done in a very long time. But it's important that you understand the groups that you're working with, what their platforms are, who their, what their tactics are, and how they plan to win at the federal level. CABA has focused primarily on congressional giving, polling, and education on the Hill. There's a reason we hired 2 top lobbyists, and it was so we could do that education and really make sure that we were influencing leadership as well as other key stakeholders. We've also made sure to partner with really, really strong partners. So strategic partners, WSWA, BAMCO, the ones I just highlighted. That has been a primary goal for us in terms of how to be as impactful as we can, given the limited amount of time. And I think that right now, without having a clear path forward and knowing that an extension request without some form of compromise is really struggling to gain more traction, we need to really take a look at what our options are. And I know there's multiple groups collaborating and talking about how to move forward collectively. But there's going to have to be certain pathways forward that are defined, and there is going to be language drafted for us to see progress moving forward. At the end of the day, we know better than anyone else that if we don't provide the language or we don't provide the guardrails in place of how they should regulate these products, what they offer us is probably not going to be what we want to see. So we have to take the time to do that education. So how can you get involved and how can you support? So speaking specifically to CABA and the retailers and wholesalers that I mentioned, we are looking to raise at minimum $2 million. I will tell you straight up, the more money, the better. And there's never enough money. I've spoken to numerous organizations in the alcohol space, in traditional retail, in just CPG groups as a whole. There's never enough money. You can always be doing something more. So we're setting the goal at 2 million because we have some very targeted things we want to execute on, and that is collective budget between numerous groups. But the more money, the more we can do, the more influence we can have. Other ways you can participate is not necessarily all monetary. Who are your partners? Who are your investors? Are there other groups and connections that you can bring to the table? Some of the best partners we have are just people we align with and we've been able to work with. There's no financial commitment to each other to work on these things. We're going to work on this together and we're going to fund these initiatives together and we're going to move forward collectively as an entity. And ultimately, those are critical components to our success. And so don't always feel like it always has to deal with money. Recruit supporters. When you talk to other people and you're like, are you involved in this? Make sure your state associations are aware of the risk at the federal level. Sometimes, particularly with alcohol groups, they're used to being regulated at the state level. So you have to remind them and bring awareness to the fact that at the federal level, there's still an existential threat. Because right now they might see these products. I mean, in Tennessee, they're at every liquor store and they're flying off the shelves. If people don't realize that there's a risk and these products go away, they're not going to step up to the table and be vocal. Whereas if they have that awareness and they know what we need to do to be more successful and keep these products open, they do step up. And those state associations do have a lot of influence with state legislature that can bring it up to the federal level. So it's a pendulum. It goes back and forth. The state activity matters and the federal activity matters, but more than anything, it's the communication and the awareness. So bringing our partners to the table. In terms of donations, all dues and all funds that CABA raises go towards lobbying efforts. And congressional giving. We do not have any paid staff. This is all done. Our goal was really to make sure that everyone knew their dollars were going to a very specific ask and use case. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think everyone in this space knows how expensive it is to operate in THC beverage. And no one needs to be paying additional dollars that are going towards more admin fees, more logistics, back end stuff. We need things that are going directly to where the change comes from. And that is, frankly, the Hill. So that is where our dollars and our efforts are completely focused on. We did add this after the last couple meetings. We do have the option for people to donate directly on the website. One-time donations, they can start in increments, or you can join and have a monthly reoccurring payment. We also do offer hourly consulting. There are lots of groups that are analyzing this space, but might not be, ready to jump in. And you can still help our efforts by signing up for the hourly consulting, and you get access to our tools, myself, and a handful of other things during that time, including our weekly newsletter. So there's many ways you can get involved. We try to make it easy. Over certain thresholds, we recommend, in terms of donations, we recommend that you speak to someone at CABA about how's the appropriate way to bring that in. Are there other vessels? Are there other ways we should get you involved? But those are all things that are really case by case basis. And I always include this at the end. We're seeing a lot more traction here with on-premise consumption. We have seen insurance groups introduce programs for on-premise consumption so that bars and restaurants can carry these products. They're getting more and more robust every day. We're seeing more festivals, and events serving these products, and alcohol is also being served alongside these at these products. Or at these events. It's important that we make sure we are training people on how to serve these products. And this certification does that in a very direct and thorough way. And it's very much built off and the framework's built off of the Cicerone project. So Cicerone, for those of you who aren't familiar, was designed for beer and training people on serving and consumption of beer at on-premise accounts. And this is something very similar. And we feel like this is a really important thing. We are starting to see more and more retailers as well as wholesalers sign up to train their team so that they can do the education on site. And there's nothing more important right now than education and making sure that we are being doing as much from a education standpoint to protect the consumer while these products are out there and there's a lack of consistency from regulation. So we need to keep that up. So we always highlight this at the end of all of our presentations because it is, at the end of the day, extremely critical. I will jump into Q&A. I did see a couple pop up, so bear with me while I pull up the questions. Let me pull these up. If anyone else has any, throw them in the Q&A. I appreciate people asking me how I'm doing and am I hanging in there. Candidly, I'm out of Diet Coke. And this is, for those of you who don't know me, Diet Coke is like my number one vice. And I'm out of Diet Coke. So today's been a tough day, but probably better for my body. That said, hanging in there okay. We are having really great positive conversations with allies, potential allies that in the past have not necessarily been coming to the table. And to me, that's one of the biggest key indicators that we are headed in the right direction with what we are trying to accomplish. There is a lot of buy-in on beverage in particular. The feedback we get from the solutions we'd like to see eventually put in place for beverage at the state level are always received with head nods, and that makes sense. Why? People understand adult beverage. It is a leg up that we have that maybe other form factors don't have with policymakers and regulators. I live in DC. I'm based here. The social scene here is very much part of being in this world, and adult beverage plays a very large role in that. And the alcohol industry has played a very huge role in working with a number of legislators and obviously developing the policy over time with TTB. So as a result, when you walk into the room and you have Specs and Total Wine and ABC and Bevmo all aligned with what you're asking for. And then you've got the beer and wine wholesalers also in alignment with what we're asking for regulation, asking for a system that has been very effective at eliminating the counterfeit alcohol market. That is important to them. And I don't think that gets necessarily enough attention, is the fact that there is a real need and desire to clean up the marketplace. And when they realize that other foreign countries have many issues with counterfeit alcohol entering the supply chain and causing real illnesses, sometimes death and fatal situations, and they realize how effective the three-tier system has been at eliminating that because of the checks and balances between the tiers, that is something that really resonates, because they see a solution that cleans up a portion of the market. I'm not saying that's a perfect solution and that it's going to fix everything. Everything is a work in progress, but having that as something we can lean on is something that they hear and see as a real opportunity. Obviously, when we talk about tax revenue, and there's a lot of programs that legislators would like to see additional funding for, funding is key. So the fact that we are asking for taxation here and, evaluating solutions for that and have states that are already doing it that we can point to what's worked and what hasn't, that's also beneficial. So I do feel really that the response we're getting and the partners we're walking into the room with have really changed the landscape. And I guess the other piece I'll add to that is, a year ago, it was CABA and WSWA that were really speaking to the THC beverage sector and talking about regulation and representing that at the federal level. We didn't have BAMCO, the retailers united separately. We didn't have beer and beverage wholesalers, total beverage wholesalers, represented in the same way. And now we're entering the room together. That says a lot about where this industry's come. It also says a lot about the partners that we're working with, that they trust these brands and these suppliers, and then we walk them through all the science behind our category. We are really walking in with a 360-degree view and very transparent about our industry. And I think that's built a lot of trust, which has obviously helped. There are some questions about advocacy to utilize the three-tier system and supplier direct-to-retail partnerships that bypass that second tier. States do have different regulations, so that states can make adjustments there depending on what they are looking to implement. But essentially, if you sign on to the three-tier system as it exists, it requires wholesalers or at least licensed wholesalers to be participative and to be included in that role. The three-tier system is something that is extremely trusted and also probably a path of least resistance in many ways, but it also includes all of our partners working together, and seeing them all unite on this message has really been critical to us making more traction over the most recent months. We did get a question about a 2-year delay and if we see people coalescing around a single proposal. There are a lot of groups currently meeting, and this is a very much an in-progress thing, talking about what compromises and solutions and pathways forward exist. I mentioned riders and people talking about, opportunities to tag different things on to an ag relief bill or something else that's introduced, in March here. And there are, I would say the alcohol groups are very aligned with what we would like to see moving forward, and what the hemp beverage groups would like to see. I think there's some work still being done with some of the other categories to see if we can all align on a solution and move forward together. But the beverage groups are very much around a particular solution that the details haven't been worked out yet. And we are still finalizing a lot of things and doing candidly a lot of behind the scenes meetings to get buy-in before formally introducing anything. But those conversations are happening now, and it's very much being well received in terms of the initial conversations that I'm having on the Hill. Yes. So there was a statement about rounding up program that we mentioned for brand retailers, on a prior call, and giving the opportunity to bring awareness to the consumer about, hey, these hemp beverages could go away. Would you be willing to round up on your purchase and donate the additional, 84 cents or whatever that might be to our campaign? We've had a couple conversations with different retailers, as well as brands that are open to those solutions. We haven't necessarily formalized anything yet, but we are discussing things like matches, and coming up with additional partners that if we raise a certain amount, we have a match. We're also looking at some auction and event specific sponsorship opportunities that might allow for additional fundraising. Because what we do realize is it's very hard for people, particularly right now, to part with dollars as a brand or someone who is looking at potentially an existential threat that eliminates their product, to part with dollars without getting something in return. So we are trying to develop more and more of these programs that provide a platform for some exposure for brands, but also potentially just relationship building within the industry. So there will be more on that probably shared early next week. But we are working on developing and finalizing some of those campaigns. And I do think a rounding up program that's done at the retail level could be really impactful and also great from an awareness and PR standpoint. And one thing I didn't touch on too much here, PR does play a role in this. After the EO, for example, there was a lot of polling done to see how the response was to rescheduling the concept and also putting products through the healthcare system for reimbursement. Again, on the dietary supplement side, the feedback from those polls was extremely positive. So as a result, I think there's a lot of interest in coming up with other ways to regulate and create pathways forward for various products because they saw that positive traction. The more positive PR we can put around our categories, regulation moving forward in certain states, more positive PR, the better. I do caution people though, we do have to be very careful. Obviously, there's dietary supplements that focus on more of a health and wellness sector. We are not that. We are an adult beverage and we are looking to be sold at liquor stores, convenience stores where adult beverages are sold. Anywhere where adult beverages are sold and served, we believe that we deserve a seat at the table with the proper dosages and regulations. But it's important that we don't confuse that with health and wellness. We are looking to be treated more like a recreational product than we are a health and wellness. And we need to be very transparent about that because I think a lot of people feel like the hemp industry as a whole has really hidden behind, particularly the intoxicating hemp side is hidden behind health and wellness. And I think we all know that the plant can do a lot of things, but we need to be realistic about how these products are being utilized by the consumer, and where we are looking to be sold and served really does determine how we define our product and how we describe it. We're on the last 5 minutes. So before, there's been a number of people who've dropped off and I realize people do need to go. But if there are any regulatory questions in general about what's happening at the federal level, any state specific questions, if I know the answer, I will try to give it. But if I need to get more information, I will gather it for you and respond separately. Let's see, we did get another one. Good question. During a volatile period in the industry, what companies and consultants do you recommend working with to help? Obviously, I recommend our organization in terms of federal advocacy, education, and congressional giving. It's a big focus for us. In terms of consulting, there are a number of groups I've spoken to that I think could be a good fit. There's some good, I'm actually going to drop some names. I hope they're okay with me saying their name because they're going to get some inbox messages on LinkedIn. For C-stores, Melissa Vonderhaar from IC Innovations is a go-to. She can not only provide you with solutions for your in-store displays at C-stores, but she can speak to the environment as a whole. She's also the chair or maybe executive director, I'm not sure the official title, my bad, chair of the CSP Cannabis Coalition, and they do a lot of good education and a lot of good work to help the convenience store channel in particular continue to be active and be involved. And a ton of good advocacy comes out of that group as well. They're also the group putting on the Cannabis Forum next month, but couldn't say more great things about Melissa. We've been working very closely most recently with BAMCO. So that's the Beverage Alcohol Merchants Coalition. That's being run by Jonathan Grella. And Total Wine and Specs and a number of the leading retailers are part of that group. They are very helpful with giving guidance to retailers on how they can get involved. We're also speaking, and a handful of other groups are speaking at their events, or I should say like some of the liquor retailers events about this and this alliance, and us all collaborating on a solution that puts another adult beverage on shelves where adult beverages are sold and served. So I think those groups have been great. I'm blanking on this one gal's name and I'm kicking myself, but she's also very good. If you have any questions about on-premise sampling, retail experience and what compliance needs you have, please reach out to me. I have someone for you. I am blanking on her name and I really apologize for that because she is a great resource, but she is really great with behind the scenes compliance and helping people make sure they understand their state regulations and how the brands can make sure they're in compliance, but also kind of help with on-premise groups and retail partners as well. I'm not going to speak specifically to specific state regulations. I think all state regulations that we've seen have had some good and some bad. I do think that, some of what we were seeing at the state level that's been kind of frustrating is the lack of movement because of the existential threat, which we kind of expected, right? A lot of people were like, well, am I really going to push for implementation and build a new regulatory structure when this could all be gone in November? That's actually a very logical response. It's frustrating. We don't like it, but it's very understandable because it is an investment to put through regulations. Now, if the regulations already exist and they're already being enforced and you already have an infrastructure for it, like Tennessee or Georgia, I don't see why you would pull that back, particularly right now when we're hearing that there are opportunities and different pathways forward for us to build something. So I think that I'm hopeful that states will continue pushing for regulation versus bans. And I think the other thing that comes from that is the conversation around how bans have just never been effective. The reason alcohol is legal is because of prohibition and how ineffective bans were. So that's how we've emerged. Same with marijuana. It becomes safer when it's regulated and we can control what the consumers have access to and protect them by regulating. And that I think is heard more and more the more states put regulations forward. And the fact that last year we had about 30 states that had bills in some form. Some we didn't like, some we did like, but definitely interest in putting regulations forward. And right now we have over 30 states with regulations. Again, some we like, some we don't like, but they've taken that next step. So what we need is a real thin layer of federal clarity, and then we can build upon that over time and really focus on some of the state activity as well. Channels that I feel emerging brands should focus on during this period of uncertainty. So let's say on sale, online sales like direct to consumer, brick and mortar, distribution. If you are a new brand entering the space and you don't already have brick and mortar or distribution lined up, D2C is something you're probably heavily going to rely on. Now, what I will say, just being a representative of CABA, we do not advocate for people to sell or do direct to consumer into states that have bans or have regulations. Even if they don't explicitly ban direct to consumer, be very careful with what they allow for. You just don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not able to sell your product because you violated a rule before and retailers are hesitant. So just be very careful when you're looking at the states to see if someone has explicitly banned direct to consumer. But I can tell you if they've banned a product in a state, doing direct to consumer can put your name on a list that you don't want to be on. So just want to throw that out there. Enforcement, while it might be low, it doesn't mean that there aren't ramifications for that down the road. But I do think that direct to consumer is something you're going to heavily rely on if you don't already have brick and mortar and distribution kind of lined up, primarily because, as I mentioned earlier, June and July, we are probably going to see retailers and wholesalers pull back on their inventory. They might not bring on new brands. They might only feature, maybe they don't bring on new brands, but they also cut back on how many brands they're carrying and talk about, maybe they only focus on the top 10 performing brands. That's a great question. I also think that if you are a new brand, it is important for you to think about really focusing on specific key markets to develop your brand in and start winning to show traction. It is a tough time, I think, to launch a brand, but we are seeing more and more brands do it and we are seeing success. So, kudos to you guys for making that all work because this is a tough time to raise money. It's also a tough time to launch a new product. If there are retailers, I'll throw this out there with Alt Bev Summit and CannaBev approaching next week. Those are two shows that will likely have retailers participating in some capacity. Good opportunity to get in front of retailers and wholesalers that are already in the space and maybe they're looking for new brands. So that's where some of these events, if it's not too much of an investment for you to participate, might help you build out those brick and mortar and distribution channels. I also can't say enough about how our industry is on LinkedIn in terms of supporting each other. So if you are a new brand and you are emerging and you are looking for opportunity and you're not leveraging your personal and, company page LinkedIn, I think that's a miss. I think there's a lot of people willing to help others. Even during this time, there's more collaboration happening now, maybe than ever before. And I think as a result, I think they're leveraging LinkedIn to make connections and reach out to retailers and build that rapport can be really helpful. And you'd be surprised at how many groups can help you. I guess the other thing I'd say, particularly for a new brand, there are Slack channels and groups that are very good at networking. The Hemp Beverage Alliance does have a Slack channel that has a lot of members engaged and oftentimes looking to help each other. That is a group that you could join and participate in. So I do think that, looking for those communities, and there's a number of them, and there's some that are regional, can be really beneficial to you as well. So take a look at your state orgs. So if you're, let's say you're in Georgia, look and see if there are Georgia organizations you can get involved in, because you might be able to meet and network with brick and mortar and wholesalers there, and get traction that way as well. Perfect. So there was wanted to ask about the alcohol and law policy conference, attended last year and hope to again this year. There are a lot of policy events that different organizations host. NABCA, which is the National Alcohol Beverage, I'm blanking on there's too many acronyms for me. But NABCA has their event that's focused on alcohol policy, and there is a hemp panel that myself and Michelle Bodian from Nowadays, that many of you may know, are on that panel, and we'll be talking about state legislation as well as federal, and what we are expecting to see over the next few weeks. That's I want to say March 16th and 17th. So those sorts of events are really impactful and really heavily focus on where there's alignment between THC beverage and the alcohol industry. I think more and more, because we're getting more vocal about being open and looking for three-tier influence, that has really helped bring more of these policymakers and regulators to the table, but also the alcohol allies and brands that we maybe haven't been able to work with before in the past. They're hearing it loud and clear, very clearly, where we want to live. And that evening the playing field is something that they want to see. So there's more meeting in the middle happening now than ever before. And it's because of a lot of those policy conferences, because that's where we're really able to share that. Another show that focuses on this quite a bit is the Cannabis Regulator Association event. That is definitely if you're more of if you work for a law firm or you work in policy specifically, that might be an event that you're interested in attending. If you're a brand, and you're not involved in regulatory, it's not necessarily the right place for you to be. But in terms of policy and pulling people in who really focus on regulatory, that is a good event as well to attend. They do a great job over there. Any other questions before I let you guys off the hook? Trying to think if I left anything else out. I will say we are seeing a couple things that are exciting, just as a little added anecdote. We are seeing more alcohol companies enter this space with products, and established ones that have political capital and are looking to work with us. This is an exciting time. I know a lot of people used to see competition as like not a great thing. This is an opportunity. This is an olive branch in many ways. So we need to make sure that we look at some of these scenarios and not look for negative and look for opportunities and silver linings. The last thing I'll leave you guys all with before I let you go is the fact that we all need to look for silver linings right now. It is hard to operate in our space. It always has been. But for every negative thing that happens, for example, a lot of people looked at the veto in Chicago as being a negative, because that veto means that there isn't a clear pathway for beverage, and we kind of go back to status quo while we work on other solutions. But the statement made with that veto was the fact that we want regulation, that Mayor Johnson, wants to see regulation to create a safer marketplace. That is a great statement. It wasn't that I want to see everything banned, so I don't agree with this. It's I want to see regulation. That is a very important statement that we can be leveraging in other conversations. And I do think that we need to highlight that that was the reason behind that. And we will continue to work on more solutions at the state and federal level, collectively. Never had more people coming to the table to work together on solutions. So again, just another silver lining. So as the weeks go on, feel free to reach out if there are hurdles or challenges that you guys have confusion or questions on. The next monthly call that I do, I am likely to reshift. This was a different format than we've tried before. We have a lot of repeat customers, so I wanted to change it up a little bit. But I also would love to hear from you separately, questions you would like or topics you'd like included. We'll do some slides kind of addressing those specifically on next month's call. We will continue to post updates on LinkedIn and a handful of other places. If you are a member of CABA, you get a weekly newsletter every Sunday. We give a little bit more detail than sometimes what we do in other places. And we also have a bi-weekly policy call where we go over kind of what's going on, what we're hearing. And that's generally a more candid conversation because it is members only. So if you join CABA, your dollars not only go to the cause, but you also get access to some exclusive information as well. On that note, thank you for joining me this third Thursday of February. Hope to see you next month and have a good rest of your week.